At Bear Facts, we amplify the voice of the people to shape the future of our community. We gather and share fact-based data on the issues, attitudes, and trends shaping the greater San Antonio area. With the Bear Facts podcast, we breathe life into our data. We aim to level the playing field by producing real conversations with real people and bringing scientific data directly to your fingertips. Bear Facts, your trusted local source for community data.
Well, welcome to the Bexar Facts podcast. My name is Liza and I'm joined by my colleagues, Christian Archer.
Hi, guys.
And Demonte Alexander.
Hey, everyone.
And our guest today is the president and CEO of VIA Metropolitan Transit. He came to San Antonio by way of Houston and worked for the Houston Metro for 25 years before heading up their first transit initiative. So we are so delighted to have you join us today. Jeff, welcome to the Bear Facts podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And, you know, Bear Facts is a value. In Houston, there was a similar kind of program of periodic surveying of the public for both longitudinal tracking and then tracking things that are just kind of popping at the time. Always enjoyed it. And the work that you guys have put out to date has been very fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, Jeff, thank you so much for saying that. That's really kind of you. You know, the truth of the matter is, when Liza and Demonte and I got together, we used the Kinder Institute and Rice University as our launch pad. Really what and I used the example of what they were doing in Houston, talking with Liza and Demonte about what we really need in San Antonio and in Bexar County to really help our leadership understand what's important, to everybody across the board, across geographic regions, across ethnicities, ages. And so we've had a lot of fun. It's been a very strange year, though. Obviously, we wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive in public policy. And, you know, with COVID and then with the civil unrest and the murder of George Floyd and all of these other things, then the election in November, we took a little bit of a different turn. This year, we've got the mayor's race coming up in May, but, you know, we definitely want to do a deeper dive into public policy in the future in the same way that Kinder does in Houston. Okay, well, Jeff, thank you again so much for joining us. One of the things that we tested is we kept testing CPS Energy and SAWS and VIA, and I was really surprised, one, how well VIA was polling in popularity across the city and across demographics. But then also at the same time, transportation wasn't necessarily the highest on people's lists of things that they needed to be focused on. One, I just wanted to get your comments and thoughts, and congratulations for polling so high.
Well, first of all, of course, you're pleased to poll that well, right? Particularly when they talk about utilities, and sometimes, I've had people say, well, you should be posturing transit as a utility. And in a way it is, but the difference is everybody has to have water. Everybody has to have power, right? Everybody doesn't have to use transit as a method of mobility. So there is a bit of a difference there. So the fact that we polled that high, and we know that many of the people you talk to are not necessarily our daily riders, was fine. And I hope that some of that has to do with the community type service that people read that we're doing as well. That, we serve the community as best. The business about transportation, I think it was 3%. Only 3% had it. It was very low. But look at what was down there with us: education, global warming, taxes. Now, I don't think anybody here would argue that those are not all very important in people's minds, right?
Right.
So if people consider VIA, education, and global warming together as being equally important, I consider that a pretty good rating.
Yeah, fair enough. That's right.
And Jeff, it's so cool to just, with the weight of everything that's happening, just to see you just have this positive and just this calm and collective demeanor about how you approach some of these issues, which is why my question is more on leadership. And obviously you've been a great leader since you've been at the helm. And as issues evolve in my mind, I think the leadership has to as well. So I think what are some things that you do personally on a leadership level to keep yourself informed, I guess rested, or what are some of those leadership skills that you continue to work on to just keep you at your best when you're handling some of these issues?
Well, rested is not my forte. I'm afraid, but I think that's for most of us, right? We eventually come to the point where we understand that really time is our most precious resource. So rested is a little bit difficult. For kind of that stableness, the stability, I do meditate, not at the high level. I do the simple meditation, but I meditate not as much as I would like to, but I do that. I read a lot because I think that the more you know, the more you know that you don't know.
Absolutely.
Right? Or you realize that you're ignorant, and ignorance is not a bad word unless you cling to it, right? So I realize I have a lot of areas of ignorance. And so, Demonte, right now I'm reading Caste, which is a very good book. I read how to be an anti-racist. That was an almost academic book. Learned a lot from it, but this Caste book is excellent as well because I don't have that experience. That's not part of my background.
And Jeff, I know you contributed to the Black Equity Pact too, so it speaks to you being plugged in and really being an advocate out there. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's very important. Very
Just
important.
as a follow-up to your leadership, you've been involved in a number of initiatives at VIA. What are some of your favorite initiatives that you've led?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm very proud of what the organization, and let me just say, yeah, I may be leading it, if you will, but I'm not doing it, right? So I will never say, yes, I did this, we did it. I'm very proud of our organization's response to the COVID. It hit hard, it hit fast. All organizations, I mean, my heart really goes out from the operational perspective to the education system. They weren't ready to have kids at home and be remote learning, and they had to do that so quickly. And we had to come up with ways to make sure that people could use transit safely, because inherently transit is a collection of people. It's not individual people. And so, we're constantly watching the science. And as you know, at one time it was don't wear masks, and then it was do wear masks. I'm really proud, there is now a presidential order that all people who ride planes, trains, and automobiles, well, buses, have to wear masks. I'm very proud that if you look through everything they say needs to be done, that's what we have been doing locally.
Now, Jeff, was there a panic mode going on when COVID hit where people can't get on your bus because they're scared? And was there like a moment of panic when that happened?
I don't think there was panic. And part of it was because, the city kind of shut down rapidly, right? I mean, I had my deputy CEO start on a Monday, and Wednesday everybody was at home. And it wasn't his fault, I swear. But, it happened very suddenly. And the other thing is, our bus passengers, a lot of them are in the service industry. And those jobs went away. And they're starting to come back, not nearly as quickly as we would like, but they're starting to come back. And so we ended up, our ridership dropped initially about 50%. Wow. In the bus system, and almost 80% in Via Trans, because so many of the destinations that Via Trans people went to, aside from like a personal trip to the doctor, workshops, jobs, were completely shut down. Now Via Trans has come back up to about the 50% level. Fixed routes at about a 55, 60% level. Not a big growth, but I think that piece went fairly well. I'm certain that there were customers, and I'm certain there were employees. There were so many unknowns, right?
Yeah.
And the bus operator get on the bus and have 100 people passing by every day, which is one of the reasons that we stopped collecting fares for a period of time and had people board the back bus to try. And so while we were trying to figure out how can we help this situation, we ended up putting a shower curtain in effect. Wow. So. No, I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of, Central Plaza, my office right across from Central Plaza. It is highly functioning. Over 1 million people a year board at that location. Of our 10 busiest stops in the system, 3 of them are on the plaza. So we really have kind of transformed the system a bit. We've reduced the amount of activity in downtown. Downtown will always have a lot of activity, but we've reduced that. But I think the other thing I'm proud of is that that's a wonderful addition to the neighborhood and the community. It was so well done. I credit my first chair, Henry Munoz, for giving VIA the latitude or the permission to do something more than just stick four shelters on a corner. He said, no, this can be a catalytic to a community. And we're hoping it is, because I'll talk later perhaps about the Scobie building. I'm very proud of the fact that we got $10 million of support from City Council, which is not super simple. But once Councilman Saldana rode the bus and saw what happens when you have an hour between buses and you just miss it, he championed. And so we've been able to increase frequency, which is my mantra: frequency, frequency, frequency. But I'm most proud, so I'll get to the end here. I am most proud of the fact that we have been able to build a great team, because ultimately, as I said, I don't do everything. The team does it all, and the people that are closest to me, my senior management team and executive management team, all great people. And if I were abducted by aliens tomorrow, VIA would march on without a beat. I'm confident of that. And that's probably the most important thing. You want to talk about leadership? That's the most important thing a leader can do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
At a crossroads with limited financial resources and challenging natural resources, especially as it relates to climate change. And I want to ask you about the future of transit.
Well, I think transit will become more, people will think of VIA, in fact, as less of a bus company, which is, I think, if you ask the guy on the street, what's VIA? Who's VIA? Oh, they run the buses, right? And that has been VIA's identity, and that's been transit identity, quite frankly, for eons. But I think they'll see that we're moving into being more of a mobility company and not care necessarily about whether it's a bus or a sedan running Uber-like service, or an automated vehicle that shuttles you from the transit center to your job a mile away. There's a lot of opportunities there. And I just see the whole way of delivering service to the public in that way very much diversified. And it's because technology is allowing us to do it now, right? 10 years ago, we couldn't do many of the things we're doing. We wouldn't be able to run a VIA Link service like we are in the Northeast 10 years ago. And I think technology will continue moving forward. We'll incorporate technology in other ways. We bought CNG buses to replace our diesel buses. CNG buses are cleaner than diesel buses. They're not as clean, however, as an electric bus. Now, electric buses, right now, my professional opinion, I'm sorry, because it's not a professional, is that electric buses are not really quite ready for prime time. Not quite. They're getting there, and they keep getting closer and closer. I'm convinced that when the CNG fleet that we've built is ready to be replaced, I'm almost 100% certain we'll replace them with electric vehicles. And in fact, we're starting to look at building a second bus garage, and we're looking at how we build the capacity for electrification there. So there's just lots of opportunity.
Wow, that's great. This has been such a weird year, Jeff, right? So we start off last year with the mayor talking about his number one initiative. His legacy is going to be transportation. And then, of course, COVID strikes. Our polling is going to do a deep dive into this transportation initiative, and everything was all about transit. And I think that there's incredibly frustrating for the mayor for his agenda. Can you tell us where do we stand right now with VIA's long-range plan, and the difference between the long-range plan and the VIA Reimagined plan? Or are they the same? And give us kind of a status update of where we are.
Sure. So let me go through the plans, because I get a lot of questions about that. Geez, you guys got a lot of plans, right? So, the Vision 2040 is exactly that. It was a 25-year plan, and it was a vision plan. There were general ideas of what we would do and how we would do it, but it wasn't really programmed out specifically. There was some program. It's a vision, right? So then VIA Reimagined was, well, what would we do in the first 10 years of that plan? So you can just think of it as a chunk out of the long range, right? Yep. And then, and so Via Reimagine said, what would we do if we got another 1/8 cent sales tax over the decade of the 20s, in effect? Because at that time, as you said, the thought was that probably mid this year, Via would start getting additional revenue. That was the Via Reimagine plan. And now we have Keep SA Moving. And so, what's the difference between that one and this one? The difference is we don't get the revenue for 5 years.
Right.
And so it's still a 10-year plan, but it has only half the revenue. And so it's basically the same plan that has to get massaged both temporally and financially, right? And so where we stand with that, of course, is we don't start seeing the additional funding until 2026. And the additional funding is going to go to provide more MOD, mobility on demand, what we call Via Link service, provide operating costs for advanced rapid transit, and then help with diversification of the bus system. We are marching forward, planning that advanced rapid transit system, because the surety of having funding in 2026 allows us to start progressing toward federal funding for the building of it. The feds will not even consider a proposal unless you have two things. One is you have your local match identified for the construction, and the second, and perhaps more importantly, you have a sustainable source of funding to operate. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have that sustainable source of funding in your hands at that time, but we right now have a 2026 kickoff, and so we can go to the feds and say, this line won't open until 2028. We start getting this in 2026. We continue to get it each year. We can support that operation. We're advancing a couple of the MODs with the funding that we have. And so later this year, we will put a second MOD. And maybe we should talk about MOD in a bit, exactly what that is. MOD. Very odd, man. So we're doing it at a 17 square mile on the northeast. I'm talking with my hands, I realize that. On the northwest side, we will do a very similar thing over toward UTSA. And then Sandy Oak, we're going to try something that's not quite the same model, but similar, where we collect people in Sandy Oak and take them to the Brooks Transit Center, and then they feed into the rest of the system there. So lots of things.
Gotcha. I got a quick follow-up, Jeff. Is rideshare included into that plan? What in the future of the plans as you guys lay things out?
So that's a perfect follow-up question, because that's what MOD is. MOD, what we call Via Link, is a ride share type system. Now, we happen to have contracted that out to a company called Rideco, and they subcontracted the delivery of service to Yellow Cab. They could have subcontracted to Uber, to Lyft, to Mon Pa Kettle Shop, but that was who they chose. But from the passenger's perspective, it's so similar. You have an app on your phone. You can also use a telephone if you don't have a smartphone. You have an app on your phone. You make a request for a trip, just like you would today with Uber or Lyft. The only limit is it only applies in that 17 square mile area, right?
Well, there's a reason why people just flock to rideshare. There are obviously some issues with cabs, and so that's interesting that they would make that. I'm just being real,
Well, but here's the thing with rideshare is that there was a period of time where rideshare wasn't interested in, I'll say, playing with transit.
Oh, okay. There you go.
And they had the opportunity to respond to these requests for proposal and didn't. Since COVID, there has been, and probably a little before, but especially since COVID, there has been a whole lot more embracing of how can Uber, how can Lyft, how can they work with transit? I'm sure their revenues and ridership went way down too, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So now we think that they're probably more likely to play. And as a result of that, we're putting in a request for proposal out probably next week for that northwest side. And we will send it to all of them, and they may partner, Rideco may partner with them rather than Yellow Cab for that matter.
Yeah, and I know my colleagues need to jump in here, but I just wanted to make sure we got that out, because obviously you guys are with cabs, want to make sure that there is opportunities for other people to join the table as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. We have completely free competition.
Jeff, you said this very quickly, but you commented about the revenue not coming in for another 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So what we're going to be able to do is advance some of the capital projects. Not so much the operating projects, because we'd have to come up with operating dollars every year. Now we're always looking for sources of those funds, and the Metropolitan Planning Organization has a call for projects, and we're submitting some that are operating projects, and that congestion mitigation air quality funds can be used for 3 years of operation. So we might be able to do the first 3 years of it under those funds, and then at 2026 the other funds kick in. So that, that's kind of that works. When we did our financial forecast, the most recent one, and we're updating it right now, of course, but the most recent one, once with the CARES Act and with the city's commitment to the $10 million a year for a 5-year period, we could stay healthy financially through the 5 year, through 2025, which is what we were looking at. We were, really at the margin in 2025, but there's a lot of assumptions built into all of that. We wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the CARES Act. If the CARES Act weren't there, the first CARES Act especially, we would have been cutting service. We were blessed. We didn't have to cut service. We did cut some service just based on demand, but we didn't have to cut service. And most importantly, we didn't have to lay anybody off. We eliminated about 12% of our vacancies in administration, but we didn't eliminate any bus operator positions, any mechanic positions, any van driver positions. We need them ready to help us when we're ready to go.
Absolutely. Jeff, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. There's as popular as VIA is, when people criticize VIA, they comment, and I've heard this for years, about buses that are not filled. They don't see the buses at high capacity, or they see maybe VIA facilities being underutilized, aka the facility on 281. It's not visible to see the demand. How do you respond to the negativity surrounded low ridership?
Well, let me start with the facility on 281. So when COVID hit, commuter ridership drops far heavier than local bus ridership. If you look in Houston, you'll see that they have a massive commuter system with some of their parking lots, 2,800 spaces. We have 400 in Stone Oak. 2,800 spaces. They stopped running all their park and ride service for months, and they've just started reintroducing it, right? So we stopped running park and ride service for the Stone Oak Park and Ride right now. So if you don't see anybody there, it probably contributes to it. Yeah. You might see a bus there because we do have a crosstown front that starts in Stone Oak and ends in the medical center, and that happens to be the end of the line. And so that bus will come through there and go into its layover where they can get the recovery and the operator can take a stretch. But we are not running commuter service from there. And so no, there is nobody there. However, when the HOV opens and we will have a direct flyover connection, that's going to be a sweet market. And as that HOV continues, HOVs are the reason I'm in transit, quite frankly. If it weren't for HOVs, I don't know if I'd be in transit. I don't know whether I should blame them or thank them. But
and I think that speaks to the vision, right? Because sometimes you gotta have a vision for where you see transit going. And for the people, obviously you build this big facility because you're anticipating all this stuff that's coming. But I think the community, the surrounding people who go by there don't understand or see that vision. So they're like, why do we have this empty space here? But like you said, I think as development starts to happen, those highways start to fill out, people, okay, I see why they put this facility here. Yeah, so that's a good point too. Thank you.
And I was going to talk now about the empty bus syndrome. Okay. Empty bus syndrome. All right, so first of all, we had Texas A&M Transportation Institutes, of which I am an alumnus, right? We had them pull together a peer group of other organizations. We said we have to include Austin, Houston, and Dallas in that group. And they came up with 9 other entities, Orlando and Pittsburgh, I think. And there are about a dozen agencies. And we track indicators across those agencies annually based upon the data they submit to the feds, right? So if you look at the most recent data that we've looked at, we're going to update it. and you look at the number of passengers that are carried per hour of bus service. And so that says if a bus is out there for 1 hour, how many people got on that bus, right? And so if 2 buses are out there, that's 2 bus hours, right? And how many people got on those buses divided by 2, right? So bus hour is just a way of measuring how much service you have on the street. So if you look at that peer group, we have the highest number of boardings per hour of the entire group. We're up at 22.4. I love that. 22 people per hour. Now, that's going to vary, obviously, just like everything else does, over the time of the day of the week, the route itself, right? And so there are going to be some buses that in the evening are only carrying half of that, or even a quarter of that. And there's going to be other buses in the peak that are carrying 2 and 3 times that. But 22.4 is our passenger rating. And let me just talk to you about the other side of that, which is cost. So then we also looked at cost per passenger. And that has to do with how efficiently you run your system and how efficiently you schedule your system. Same group of peers. This time we took second place, which I don't like, but we did take second place. We were at $4.31 a trip, and Orlando beat us at $4.26 a trip. I mean, so they're within fighting range, and dang, we're going to beat them next time. Interesting fact, because I get this all the time. Why don't we have a system like Dallas, right? Of course, I go through some explanation about the funding. That in 20 years they bring in $6 billion more than we do. That you can build some stuff with that, right?
Right.
But the other factor is, that Dallas, I said that our cost per passenger is $4.31. Theirs is $8.82. So if we were more like Dallas, we could only afford half of the service we have. That's why. So we don't want to be like Dallas. We want to be like we are, at the top of the game.
Well, I think for a long time, VIA was, the criticism for VIA was just kind of like you heard that same thing over and over and over again. And I think a lot of people just don't understand the numbers that you just laid out, Jeff. So I think it's very important to inform people on the success of VIA, but then look at the poll numbers. And across the board, VIA's popularity is through the roof. And yet the funding sources for decades and decades have been neglected at VIA. So I've got a curveball question for you, Jeff, that might get us in trouble here.
I'm ready.
Do you think light rail in San Antonio is dead, or do you think at some point it will be considered part of our transportation mix?
My answer, as far as do you think San Antonio will ever approve light rail? My answer is I hope not. I know that's maybe surprising, but bus rapid transit or advanced rapid transit is because we're talking about electric buses, maybe autonomous buses that are running just like light rail at half the cost. Why would you? And they generate the same kind of benefits, the same kind of service benefits. We believe the same kind of development benefits. If they do that, then why would you want to spend twice as much so you could have a light rail? I'll tell you why you would do that. And that would be if your demand was so high that you needed, 400 seats per trip rather than 100 seats per trip, for example. We don't see that in the, foreseeable future. Quite frankly, Austin, they have a long range forecast that puts them there. And that's why they went with light rail, because they're saying if our long range forecast is correct, we're going to be outside of the bus or automated rapid transit capacity, but we're fine. And I would never say, spend twice as much so that you can say we got light rail. Yeah, that's foolishness.
Yeah. Jeff, I want to ask you something real quick. Are you guys participating in vaccine rollout by any means by getting people to vaccine locations?
Yes. Well, our service serves those areas, so we didn't really have to do anything fancy with that. But what we are doing is we're providing for people that are going to have their vaccines, we're providing them free service. If they need free service. Even if they don't need free service, we're providing free service to and from the sites for both vaccines. All you do is bring your appointment card or whatever you have to indicate that. And that's kind of how we're trying to support it.
Now you're in communication with the mayor and the judge on what you guys offer, so they can put that out at the press briefings, or how is that communication happening?
We're hoping that we will have improved communications.
Okay.
I learned about the Alamo Dome on the news.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. Perfect.
So, we all got together over the weekend and scrambled and said, what can we do? And the good news is this Alamo Dome, so we have service nearby. That wasn't a big deal. Well, what could we offer free fares? And, so we put that together. You got to get the word out to the operators, let the board know. We got that all together over that weekend. So we were kind of caught flat-footed only in that, we weren't informed. But I've had discussions with the city manager. He understands. I understand their position. They have to figure out how to do this so quickly because it's so important to get out there. They don't necessarily think about the people that ride the bus to get there. Now, I will be really interested in how we reach out to those people that don't leave their homes. I volunteered for Meals on Wheels last week, and you're dropping food by for people that don't and can't leave their homes. And so it's not a matter of they can't afford a bus ride. They can't go out and get on a bus, and a very vulnerable population. So it'd be interesting to see how that moves forward.
Jeff, since we've been talking so much about the pandemic, can you tell us some other ways that the pandemic has forced VIA to change what you do, how you do it, just as a normal operational day? Are there things that you guys will have changed that will continue post-pandemic?
Well, so we had to make the modifications. So we have now put in plexiglass areas for the operators, right? As opposed to the shower curtain. And most buses now have those. And of course, those will stay. And they also provide some security to the operator. What we're doing is with, the Via Trans drivers, especially when we were down to only 15%, then we put the Via Trans drivers out at various locations, mostly transit centers. And that's where we're doing the multiple cleaning of the buses every day, that they walk through high touch points, they clean down. We always have washed and sanitized the fleet every day. And that, of course, will continue. I doubt that there'll probably come a time when we're not washing the bus in between, walking down the bus in between, but we'll continue always to wash and sanitize the bus every day. This was a surprise to me. New York City only washed and cleaned and sanitized every 3 days. I was amazed because I just thought everybody did it every day, right? And so that will continue. We're requiring masks, and now it's a federal mandate. I will continue requiring masks as long as it's wise. Again, we all hope there'll come a day when we don't wear masks and we can actually be in each other's presence and maybe get a hug, all those kinds of things. Then organizationally, of course, I think I told you we did have to reduce our administrative staff about 12%. And we have a fairly small administrative staff to start with. So there's been some burden. We've had people working at home, but as you can well imagine, bus operators and mechanics can't do their job at home. And that's the majority of our employees. But we've made a lot of accommodations for working from home. We're like everybody else. When things come back, is everybody going to come back to the office? Is everybody coming back to the office every day? So we're kind of looking at that with respect to our office space. And then we, like every organization, have to struggle with the fact that we have a lot of people that are off work because they're either ill or they're in quarantine. And we've had 4 members of the VIA family pass from COVID.
Oh my goodness.
That's hard. That's hard.
Hey, Jeff, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, this has been such a weird year that we're talking about people from VIA passing away in COVID and how it's hurt our community. But it's the same year that George Floyd was murdered, and you put out a statement regarding Black Lives Matter and said VIA, has been a part of the fight to bridge historic social and economic gaps. What is VIA doing to address systematic social injustice?
I would say this to you. Christian, I would say that VIA is doing what it has always done to try and help people overcome injustice, and that is by providing connection to opportunity. So the struggle, of course, we have is with our funding, the amount of service we can put on the street, the frequency you can put on the street, the number of, like quicker services like Primo that we can put on the street. So we did an analysis. If you live in the poorest census tract on the west side, right, and you have a car, you can get to nearly any job in Bexar County within 45 minutes. If you ride the bus, you can only get to 10% of the jobs in Bexar County in 45 minutes. And so the funding of transit is just another reflection of the underfunding of those kinds of services that are targeted to people in need, right? Now, as an organization, the other thing I would say is, as an organization, it's important for us to model, if you will, what we would like all employers to do. And I believe we've done extremely well in making sure that we hire the best person for the job, regardless of what color their skin is, what color their hair is, what color their eyes are, or whether their mom was cross-eyed. We'll hire them, right? And I think we've done an exemplary job. If you look at the executive management team, very diverse, especially, Lisa, women. Half of the executive management team is women. And that's a pretty good record.
Such a smart
Jeff, I think you guys even allocated a board position for someone who's disabled, correct?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
There's a board position. And Athalie Malone, who is a VIA trans and VIA writer, visually impaired, and she's a powerhouse. I love her. So yes.
Now, Jeff, we always say when it comes, everything has changed and nothing has changed.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is COVID changed everything, but some of what Christian was alluding to is some of these systemic justices have always been here. I want to ask, what's changed with VIA since COVID? You've already addressed what you guys are doing on the social justice front, but what's changed operationally for VIA? Or I'm sure you had a vision before all of this, but what are some things you guys are doing now that are different because of the pandemic?
Well, we've slowed down our service expansion. These new MODs that we're going to put in the fall of this year would have gone in last year, but it didn't make sense to add new service in the middle of a pandemic, right? So we've had to slow those things down. On the other hand, there's a bright side in that we structured a program called VIA Cares, and VIA Cares is all about how we can contribute to the community. So the free fare to the vaccination site is a piece of VIA Cares, but if you think back to the beginning of the pandemic, especially, we were there at the food bank every day, loading up food and delivering to people. The food bank is famous for the picture of all the cars, right? But how do people who didn't have cars get food? It's the same as the vaccination in many respects. We were there every day helping deliver meals. You know that we put VIA trans vehicles because we had them available. We would put them around the community to a schedule so that students who unexpectedly had to start working from home at least had some Wi-Fi access. We were like little Wi-Fi access points. Now we realized that's not a long-term solution to the digital divide, but for that time period, it was something that could be done. And so we're always looking to expand on the VIA Cares program. Part of the reason I volunteered for Meals on Wheels last week.
Now, Jeff, you guys have, and I know we're coming to the end of the podcast, but you guys have been at the forefront of data. I was part of ABLDP when the Datathon was created. The hackathon was created for VIA.
Yes.
With some of your employees. How are you guys using our data? Like, what did you find fascinating or interesting or not at all about our work? Like, could you talk more about when we release those polls, what do you get out of it? What it means to you? How do you base your decisions off of that?
Well, first of all, there's a part of anybody that believes that the opinions are important, but sometimes it takes leadership as well. There are a lot of people of the opinion that you shouldn't wear masks and you shouldn't get vaccinated, but that doesn't mean that, then we shouldn't ask for people to wear masks, right? Mm-hmm. So But there is value in at least understanding where you stand, and especially in understanding what is it that people don't understand, perhaps, right?
Mm-hmm.
I vainly like to think that people who have a lot of concern about VIA, part of it is born of the legend of all the buses are always empty and nobody rides it, right?
Yeah.
And the people who do ride it are all bums or whatever you want to say. When 3/4 of people who ride our buses are working poor is how I would describe them, right? So that's the real value, is trying to understand why people think. And of course, I don't only think about VIA. So there's all the other kinds of factors that are out there that are part of the fabric of our community. And I love San Antonio, I really do. And so I'm concerned about all the threads in the community.
Well, I got to tell you, Jeff, the reason why I was shocked is at how high VIA was polling was because everybody turns electricity on and off, and you get your monthly bill, and everybody turns their water on, and you want a fresh supply of clean water, but you don't ride VIA. Right. So to poll that popular across the board when a lot of people don't ever use the service, I think it's a feather in your cap in providing leadership to VIA and showing this long-term vision and the guts to put it on the ballot in the middle of a pandemic and pass it. I think it adds to the way that people view VIA and its importance to our community. So tip of the cap to you for that.
Well, and I have to give full credit to my board for having the guts to put it on the ballot, and especially the now past chair, Hope Andrade.
Yeah,
she's a force.
Also, a previous guest on the Bexar Facts podcast.
Well, she's a wonderful human being in every respect. She led that board. She led that board and she helped the board understand that how the mayor's vision was altering, and how we needed to work with the mayor and the city and the county, and kept everything in line, but never back down from we need to plant our flag, right? So great board.
Leadership.
Yep. That's right.
So we have a tradition that we ask all of our participants if they had a magic wand, what they would do with their magic wand. It usually is framed in the sense of the pandemic, but your answer doesn't have to be pandemic, based. If you had a magic wand, Jeff, what would you want to do that impact our community?
It's interesting because tomorrow I will finish my 66th revolution around the sun.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Happy Revolution Day.
Yeah, right. And so, oftentimes, especially at this point in life, you kind of reflect on what you've done and what the world's like and what you'd like to do moving forward, knowing, that the end is a lot closer than it used to be, if you will. And you get to the point where you realize that things don't really matter at all. I don't want things. In fact, I downsize to get rid of things, right? But what matters is you're in a great community where you feel at home, and that you're surrounded by really bright, caring, intelligent people and great friends. I put all three of you on that list, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
So if I had a magic wand, I will have to say, this is somewhat parochially, I would have the travel and tourism part of our industry go into a very strong recovery. Right? I can't help that. That's my other thing. But in a broader sense, and I don't know, it's a magic wand, right?
Yes.
Magic wand, I would create a world where there really was equal opportunity for everyone. Everyone doesn't deserve equal of everything, because ultimately there is your own effort and your contribution, everything, but everybody ought to be able to at least have the opportunity. And as I said, my ignorance, I'm working on erasing it. And we're all about access to opportunity. But like I said, the amount of investment we have really, in many ways, restricts access. We provide access, but it's a restricted access, right? And so, I guess the way I might go about that would be to erase unfounded fear in people's hearts. I think fear is the progenitor to anger. If your teenager is out and doesn't come home in time, and the later it gets, and they come home and you're angry. Now you're not angry they came home. In fact, you are thanking God they came home, right? But that fear manifests itself as anger. And I think what happens, we're afraid of something, and so we're afraid of change, right? And so angry about it, and so we do what we can to stop. And so maybe that's what we need to do is pull fear out of our hearts and put love in our hearts. And I know that is very Pollyanna. I get that, but you asked me what I would do with a magic wand.
Well, I love a good cliche, so that's good.
Yeah. No, Jeff, I think that's awesome. It's a great use of the magic wand, buddy.
Thank you.
But listen, I just want to say thank you for participating, for doing what you're doing at VIA, in showing the community that there's a better way, and having leadership to go after it, and surrounding yourself with the right board. And it's a tricky job, and you've got to constantly be threading several needles at once. And for what it's worth for me, I think you're doing an amazing job. And it's reflective in all of the data that we're showing. So we look forward to working with you and VIA as we hopefully get to do a deeper dive into policy questions regarding transportation and transit. And we look forward to working with you this year.
Excellent. Jeff. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Hope to see you soon.
Me too. I hope we can hug.